right, and so we're at slavevoyages.org, and you'll see the menu up here: transatlantic, intra-American, people of the Atlantic slave trade, resources, blah blah blah. If you click on the transatlantic menu and just click on database here, it's going to pull up the database of all of the ships when they began leaving. And the first one you'll see here is 1514, the Congo River and Vigo. And I'm curious as to where is Vigo, so give me a moment. I'm pretty sure that is a Spanish region, but I want to verify it, so give me a moment. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, so give me one moment here. Vigo. Yep, it is a municipality, a province in Galicia, Spain, and it's close to the Iberian community, so it's in Spain more or less. So they landed in Spain. The very first slave ship landed in Spain in 1514. They don't have the captain's name here, but if we go down to 1519, the name of the ship, they have the name of the ship as Catalina. I want you to notice all of the names of these ships. Okay? So the one in 1519 is S. Catalina. It began in Seville. The trip began in Seville, which I believe is a region in the Spain area, if I'm not mistaken. Not too familiar with that area, but give me a moment here and I'll tell you. Yep, Seville is a city in Spain. So this ship, the S. Catalina, left Seville, Spain in 1519, and it ended up in Puerto Rico at an unspecified port, and the name of the captain is Gustavio Coimbra. Okay? So, if we go down to 1526, one of these that left 1526, the ship name is Santa Maria de Guadalupe. One of the many ships that bought slaves from the Cape Verde Islands, which is in West Africa, okay, ended up in San Domingo, or Santo Domingo, which I believe may be a province in the Puerto Rico area. The captain's name, Francisco Pabon. Please recognize and look at these names, y'all. Maria de Bogona, Sao Tome, Pedro Montero, S. Antonio, in San Juan, the Spanish Caribbean, Martin Afonso. Here's S. Jao in 1532. Purchased slaves from Sao Tome, which I believe may be in Spain somewhere, or in that area. Hispaniola is ended up being one of the Caribbean islands. And that captain was Fernan Diaz. Okay? Let's go to the third page, because that's just the first page. Third page, I want you to look at the names again. All of these names are Spanish. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Okay? On the third page, from 1545 to 1546, most of the slaves, the ships, were coming from Seville. That's a city in Spain. And all of these ships had Spanish names: Maria de Garcia, San Nicolas, Santa Cruz, Anuncia, Santo Espirito, Concepcion, S. Anton, Fideles de Dios, Santa Maria de Guadalupe, San Joseph, San Juan. They ended up purchasing slaves for the most part in Cape Verde Islands in West Africa. They landed different parts of Spain or in that region. New Spain, Puerto Rico, Spanish Circumcaribbean, Spanish Americas, Puerto Rico, Veracruz, New Spain, Spanish Americas. And notice the name of the captains again. Garcia, Juan, Perez, Alonso, Esteban, Fernandez, Hernandez, Gonsalves, Francisco, Juan Seba, Abrego, Agustin, Vicente, all Spanish names. Now, I could tell you because I've studied this list. It's on about the 50th or 60th page that we get to 1619, the year 1619. That's supposedly around the time when the first slave ship hit the 13 colonies. And it wasn't, allegedly, it was not a Spanish ship. It was from a Spanish port. It didn't have a Spanish captain. It had another name. But I want you to understand what I'm trying to say to you. And I went through the whole list because I went page to page for the first 60 pages. And I promise you, all of the pages more or less look like this. They have Spanish names as the vessels, Spanish names and where they landed for the most part. Well, now it started going into the Caribbeans. And then we're here in 1700s. But up until 1619, from that 1514 to 1619, 1620-ish, was all Spanish. But I want you to check something out. The vessel names, they changed up a little bit, but let me go back. I don't know what I clicked on. Let me go here to the 5th page. And as you can see here, all Spanish landings. That means that what was happening was Spanish captains were taking hold of Spanish ships and going to Africa and bringing slaves to their area long before there was a slave trade that hit the 13 colonies. And that whole slave trade for that whole first century, starting in 1514, when they first started recording the names of the captains and the names of the ship and the names of the ports that they were stopping in and buying slaves from, were mostly Spanish. Buying from Africa, taking them to Spanish areas below the border. Veracruz, Hispaniola, New Spain, Spanish Circum, San Domingo, Spanish Circumcaribbean, Monte Cristi, Cartagena. Look at these names. These are Spanish names. And they were picking up slaves from Sierra Leone, where my ancestors are from. Cape Verde. Senegambia. That's a portion of Gambia. The Gambia. Okay? The vessels' names, all Spanish. I want you to recognize something and realize something. The very first slave owners were of Spanish origin, y'all. And what got me and what just had me blown away all afternoon, even as I watched Wakanda Forever, is that if you study this list throughout the transatlantic slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, let me take you to the very last page. They were collecting slaves from Africa a year after the Civil War ended, y'all. 1866. They don't have any information about that last ship. But the last ship left, they don't even know where it left from, but because they're not going to put that there, but it ended up in Cuba. 700 slaves were sold in Cuba in 1866, a year after the Civil War ended. Hmm? And I could tell you it was probably Spanish, a Spanish captain. It was probably a Spanish ship because look at these. The names of these ships have not changed, y'all. 1866, Diomi, Ciceron, Amelia, Gato, Virgen del Refugio. Those are Spanish names, y'all. Ciceron, Dominica, Guadalquivir, Poloca, Bale, Melvira Charles. Okay, this was London. Different. Okay, but look at this. Look at this. Look at this. In the 1800s, the slave trade was still active. They were taking them to the Caribbeans. They weren't so much taking them to Spanish ports anymore in Spanish regions. But I promise you, I went through the first 60 pages of this database, and it was nothing but Spanish captains on Spanish ships taking slaves from Africa, the coast of Africa, and taking them to Spanish regions. Look at this. Look at this. Lola Montes, Britannia, Britannico, Paquete de Luanda. Okay, it changes up a little bit here, but not so much so. Puerto Padre, Magari Manzanillo, Ala de Piñas, Cuba. This was in 1861 when the Civil War began, y'all. Bonifacia and the Cabanas, Isla de Piñas, Santiago de Cuba. Look at the names of these ships. They have a couple of ships here from New York, Storm King and Boneta Bonito, and they went to the Congo. And the ships landed in Liberia. I don't know if they were bringing them back. I don't know what that was about. But look at this. 1861. All of these are Spanish ports. Sagua, Trinidad de Cuba, Bahia Honda, Puerto Padre, Cuba, Port unspecified, Sagua, Bahia, that is a region in Spain, Cuba, Matanzas, Cuba, Puerto Padre, Cardenas, all Spanish ports. Where did they get the slaves from? The Congo River, Africa. Ports, unspecified. Malimbo, that's in Africa. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say to you. The slave trade was what was going on even while the Civil War was being fought. And most of the people that were responsible and that aided and abetted in the crime that is known as the transatlantic slave trade, slavery, were Spanish. And I want to ask you guys something, if it hasn't crossed your minds already. How is it that these people could see what the Africans were going through from 1514 to 1866? Let's do the math on that. Let me see, how long is that exactly? Let's see. 1866, 1514. That's 352 years. Spanish men hailed their ships to the coast of Africa and brought them to several regions. First and foremost, brought them to their own regions in the Spanish area, in the lands that they took over, the Spanish Americas, South America, Brazil, Colombia, all that, Mexico. For over 350 years, they did this. They was a party of aiding and abetting to crimes against humanity. And they never intervened. They never stopped. They never said, hey, we're not going to do this. This is wrong. They saw mothers jumping overboard with their babies and their children. But they did nothing to stop. They didn't say, hey, we're not doing this anymore. This is wrong. They kept on, y'all. What kind of people would do that? These were the people that probably gave the British this idea to have their own slave trade. Huh? Do you know that the first slave uprising was on a plantation in Spain? It was on a plantation in Spain among slaves that was on the plantation, and they got tired and they rebelled. There were plantations. Listen here. Enslaved people challenged their captivity in ways that ranged from introducing non-European elements into Christianity to mounting alternative societies outside the plantation, also known as the slave labor camp system. The first open black rebellion occurred in Spanish labor camps or plantations in 1521. Resistance, particularly to the enslavement of indigenous people, also came from Spanish religious and legal ranks. The first speech in the Americas for the universality of human rights and against the abuses of slavery was also given on Hispaniola 19 years after they brought their first crop of slaves into that region. So, the Spanish were the very first slave traders, y'all. The Spanish had the very first plantations, not the Caucasians. Not excusing the Caucasians, but the Spanish were the very first slave traders. And I found this article here, The Iberian Roots of the Transatlantic Slave Trade. So it goes back even further than 1514. 1514 is the very first recorded date that is available, showing us what slaves left where, where did they go to buy their slaves, and where did they go to sell them. But the slave trade was going on in the 1400s. And this is a really good article. This article I got from the Gilder Lehrman Center for the Study of Slavery Resistance and Abolition. And this is currently housed at Yale University. It's been open since 1998. It's the first institution in the world that's devoted to the scholarship, public education, and outreach about the global problem of slavery across all borders and time. So I realized then Iberia is in Spain. The transatlantic slave trade has Iberian or Spanish roots. And this is a really good article on the GilderLehrman.org website. And it tells you about the history of the transatlantic slave trade. Not just, here in the United States, and the relationship that the Spanish had with other slave traders and with the indigenous people that were already here. There are some of us already here before 1619. It's this very complicated, very strange thing that I've learned here today, because it's kind of heartbreaking to think that for over 350 years the Spanish people that we've always rallied for and tried to advocate for, their ancestors had us as slaves before anybody else in Spain and Portugal. And I guess they were hired. I don't know what the deal is. why they continued. That it had to be for money. But it's just something that's very interesting that I've noticed come across. And I think that you should do your own research to learn more about the relationship between black and brown people in this country. There is no black and brown coalition now. There can't be one. Because we're finding out that the racism is not just in one particular race of people. The racism towards people of African descent. We have people of Spanish descent that has a longer history of enslaving us as a people. And that's very hurtful to hear and to find out. I know some really, really, really great Spanish people, but it explains a lot. So at any rate, I'm not going to hold you up any longer. Just thought that that was really, really powerful. Again, I invite you to do your own research. The website is slavevoyages.org for the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, and I'll put the websites where I got this information in the description box so that you guys can do your own research and you'll be able to spell the names properly in case you just want to search for it in Google or Duck or what have you. You guys have a great day. Be blessed, be safe, and know that the Most High has your back.